Hello everyone and welcome back to our course. Here I am in Google Colab, which you can find at colab.research.google.com. And here's where I'm going to begin building our project. All right, so first steps first, we have to upload our CSV file into the project. So we're going to create a new code cell and we're going to begin by importing the files module from google.colab because this files module will allow us to upload a file to the Colab. All right, then I'm going to make another variable here. I'll call this my file. And I'm going to use the files module.upload function. When I run this code cell, I am going to get a prompt to select a file from my computer. And then that file is going to be loaded into the Colab project. So hit this button, choose files, and then select the file author and quote. This is a CSV file that I will include for you in this section. Okay, then hit enter or open and look at that. You'll get this message saving author and quote.csv to author and quote.csv. This means that throughout the whole project, you can now refer to this file by its name and you'll be able to access it inside of this project. So you see here, 100% done means the file has been 100% uploaded. All right, now we can verify that we do have the file. So we'll make another code cell. And I am going to call print to print a message to my console here. I'm going to print the length of file.keys. Then I'll run this code cell and I'll get one return. That's the number of keys in the file. I can also just print out the file itself. And look at that. I will get the name of the file, author and quote.csv, and then I'll get all the contents of the file. So we can see here author, comma, quote. We have backslashes and spaces, and we have all the text. Okay, so that verifies that we do have the file there. Next up, let's take this file and let's use the Pandas library to read this CSV file. So we have to decode the CSV file in order to create a list from it. Okay, so I'm going to have to import the Pandas library, so import Pandas. This is a very commonly used library, very popular for data pre-processing. Okay, and the Pandas library has many functions that we're going to put to use, okay? Starting off with the read CSV file. And for that, we call pandas.read_CSV. This is going to allow us to take a CSV file and convert it to a Python list. So in here, I have to grab io.string.io in order to create a string or more out of the CSV file. So for that, I do have to import io as well. So let's just import io in order to access that module as well. Then inside of the function here, string.io, we are going to pass in our file and at the author and quote.csv name. All right, because the file, it refers to everything we've uploaded, which is currently just one file. But we could have multiple files in here, so that's why we need to grab everything that's been uploaded and then add the appropriate file name. So really this will be more accurately called directory, but it doesn't matter. Okay, next up, after we have converted the CSV file to a string IO, we are then going to add decode in order to decode the characters. And in our case, the character set is UTF-8. This is the most common character set. It's for the English language, for Roman characters. And as well, we have to define a separator, and our separator is a comma. So let's talk about what that separator is. This separator is going to take the CSV file and it's going to create a list out of the CSV file, and it's going to split all of the strings inside of the CSV file. How it splits them is going to be at every single comma. So that's considered the split point. And in fact, I'm just going to open my CSV file for you to show you. Okay, this is the CSV file and I've included it for you in this section. So it's called author and quote.csv, and I just opened it in my text editor, but you could also open it inside of Excel or inside of Google Sheets. because it is a CSV file after all, but it's very similar to a text file. All it has is author, comma, quote at the top as the header, and then it has an author and also a quote per author, so it has these rows. I created this file inside of Google Sheets, and it's really just two columns, an author column and a quote column. Now, when you create a file in Google Sheets, if you export it and if you open it inside of a text editor, you'll see that every column is going to be separated by a comma. So that's why we use the comma as the separator. There are many other separators, like for example, you could use a space as a separator or a tab as a separator, but the comma is really easy to understand, so that's why I chose that. And the comma was also just automatically created for me. When I created this CSV file in Google Sheets, it then just immediately turned every new column, like every space in between columns, into a comma. Otherwise, how would it be able to separate columns when I open it inside of a text editor? All right, so that is our CSV file. Feel free to look into it more if you're interested in seeing all the authors and quotes. Okay, so now we are using Pandas to read that CSV file. And the result of this function reads CSV. It returns a list, a Python list. And that's because we take this CSV file and we turn it all into a string with string.io. We turn it into one huge string with the appropriate character set, which is just the Roman language or English. And then we have the separator, a comma. So we take that string, the first argument of read CSV, and we separate every single substring inside of that huge string. We separate it at every comma. And those are the two arguments that are required for the read CSV function. The result of this is going to be a list of our authors and our quotes. So for that, I'm just going to save this as my file list. Okay. Now we have a variable file list that we can refer to. So let's use that and verify that we do indeed have everything loaded in. It's my file list, and I'm going to print out my file list.head.toStrings. This will give me the head of it. Don't pass this as a parameter, but instead just assign it to equal the sep argument. Then if I rerun this code cell, look at that. Now I get the first 6 rows in my CSV file. We get the head, and then we get the first 5 entries. And that's what we get when we call this head function and convert it to string. Now this file list, it's more accurately called a data frame. So really, I'm just going to change this name to data frame so we don't get confused. Whenever we use Pandas, we'll often return a data frame. This read CSV file returns what's known as a Pandas data frame. That's why when we try to print it, we have to get its head and then to string. We can't just print out its values. I mean, we could try. You can print out here data frame and run this code cell, and we get a very similar result, but this time we're printing the whole data frame you see here from index 0 to 49. So if we want to just get the first 5 entries, we use .head. I can call print dataframe.head and rerun this code cell, and I get a very similar result here as well, but we use toString just to make sure that none of the quotes get cut off. All right, now how do we take this Pandas data frame and how do we convert it to a Python list? Well, first off, let's look at the data frame with more detail. I'm going to print here the data frame, and I'm going to add the describe function. So every data frame has a lot of Pandas functions that you can use, such as head or describe. And the describe function returns for you some information about the data frame. So first we have the first row in the CSV file, which is author and quote. Then we have count, which is the number of entries. We have unique, which is the number of unique entries. We have top and frequency. And that would be if we had non-unique entries, then we would see the most frequent entry here in top. But because all of our entries are unique, we just get a random value here. So this provides us some more information about the data frame, which means we know that if we create a list, that list should have 50 entries. And if you have any error messages coming up at this point, then it probably means that your CSV file is corrupt. So just make sure whenever you are working with a CSV file that it is in the proper format. For example, here it is in Google Sheets, our same CSV file. And typically it's best to open your CSV files in either Google Sheets or in Excel, some kind of software that is primed or created for working with CSV files. Because even if you just open a CSV file in a text editor, sometimes the formatting of the file can change and then you'll get error messages. So I do recommend when you're working with CSV files, open them in Google Sheets or Excel or another platform that's specific for CSV files. Okay, so if you do get any error messages, just make sure that you only have 2 columns here in this CSV file, because sometimes if you open it in a program, it can accidentally cut some text, perhaps at a space or at a line break or even a text wrap, and it can move it to a 3rd column, which is not what you want. You want to make sure you only have 2 columns. All right. If you get any other messages as well, any other error messages, then just Google them, search them up, or even search them up on Stack Overflow. Typically, you can always find a solution to any error messages that you get. All right, back to our data frame. How do we take this data frame and convert it to a Python list? Well, what we can do is just use the toList function from Pandas. So I'm going to open up another code cell. I'm going to grab our data frame, and at a specific column, at the quote column, I am going to use the toList function to convert that to a list, and then I'll save that as our quotes list. All right. Then I'm going to print out my quotes list. I'll run this code cell and look at that. Now what we get is not this formatted data frame, which kind of looks like it's in columns, but we just get a regular Python array, also known as a Python list. It has the square bracket to open up the list, and then it just has all the entries in quotation marks because they're strings, and every entry is separated by a comma. And this quotes list, it only has the quote column. It doesn't have the author column because we took the data frame and we took the column quote and converted all of its entries to a list. We could do the same for the authors as well if we needed to. And that is how we can load in our CSV file here into Google Colab, into our Python project. We also learned how to use the popular Pandas library to convert our CSV file to a data frame. This is very commonly done for any data science project. And then we took that data frame and we learned how we can create a Python list out of the data frame. All right, join me in the next lecture. We will continue our project and we're going to learn how we can tokenize our text data, how we can turn different words into tokens. And that's very important because we need to be able to represent words numerically if we want to perform any kind of data science or machine learning on it. Join me in the next lecture where we will continue the project.